Hello, everyone. We are live with Dr. Daniela Farkas, and we talk about how plant affect us. Hello, Dr. Farkas. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
We have a very interesting topic again, and this is about how plants affect us. Really, how plants affect us. Please tell us.
This is such an interesting topic, and
Yeah.
I am absolutely mesmerized about plants. I wrote a book, it's gonna be in print in this year, hopefully, and it's called The Amazing Plants. And when I started to study plants, the more I study them, the more in awe I am at the intelligence encapsulated in plants. If you start to think about plants developed on this planet, evolved on this planet before animals. And there was pretty much not too much to eat. Some of the nutrients were able to diffuse into the cell of the plant. And the plants wanted to make their own food. So they developed a process where they would literally take the available sun and water and make sugar out of it through a process called photosynthesis. This reaction is so amazing that life on this planet depends on this reaction. There would be no life without plants. The side effect of this reaction is that they produce oxygen and water. It is amazing. I mean, imagine to be able to take the sun, which is in space, and oxygen, which is it was available at that time, or carbon dioxide actually, not only oxygen, and to make your own food. It is absolutely brilliant. After I discovered how what an important step it was, I started to follow plants. How exactly did they develop, and up to the point where we are now? For example, we develop plants learn to get out of the aquatic environment like the ocean and move on land, but on the land the environment was very harsh and winds were very strong, so plants develop roots. This is super important because the roots serve uh, couple of functions. Number one, it anchored the plant, so the plant would not be moved around by the winds, which were super strong. But number two, it developed a way of attracting and collecting the nutrients that it might find in the soil. So it really served the plant well. I thought it was very smart. Um, Everything seemed to be okay, and the more plants developed, the more oxygen it developed, and then little insects came about. So the plants looked around to see how can it use insects for their benefit. And like any living organism, a plant wants to thrive, to live a long life, and to see its offspring or children survive and flourish. So this was the idea of the plant. So how can the plant use tiny insects for its goal? So it developed a way of making a flower and putting nectar in it. Into the nectar, it was a lot of sugar that the plants make that it's very attractive to the insects. Insects would go for the sugars and for the food, but by flying from one flower to the other, it will accomplish the goal of a plant to produce pollination, therefore facilitating a new plant. I thought this is when I start to think about, I said, my God, this is really amazing. The more plants evolved, the more diversified they got. So, for example, in some area, plants didn't have access to the sun because a lot of other plants grew. So, some plants decided to grow on trees, no roots. Uh, no nutrients from the soil. So, where the plants would get the nutrients? So, they would develop uh, different mechanisms of luring the insects, and by this time, very small animals like a bat, for example, to rest on a plant. So, the plants, like for example in Amazon, made a little pouch that has a lid, and it pretty much serves as an air conditioning room. Tiny, enough for a bat in the heat of the day to rest in this air conditioning. You, uh, the bat would stay there very happy. It was supplied with nutrients like a little sugar, nectar, and the room to rest. Hoping that on the way out, the bat would give the droppings, which are full of nutrients for the plant, so the plant would benefit for the droppings. I thought, my God, those plants are really
It's
smart.
an exchange. It's kind of exchange.
Change. And everything was nice and dandy. The more the evolution continued, the more animals developed and more specialized animals. So the plant was faced with a dilemma. For example, they were herbivore plants that eat animals that eat plants. So imagine a plant idea is to live a long life, and here comes an animal that eats the plant. This is not what the plant has in mind. It likes to thrive. So the plants couldn't run because they had the roots. So they developed other mechanisms of protecting themselves. So develop something called lectins. The lectins would be proteins that are made by the plants and serve the plant. For example, if the plant wanted protection, it would develop lectins that would affect the insect or the animal that wants to eat it, and it will try to poison it. So even if it would not be to the type of completely poisoning the animal, it would give a headache or it would give a stomach ache to the animal. So in time, the animal will know maybe I shouldn't touch this plant or others. And this way, the plant will be saved.
Yeah.
Plants also develop lectins to protect from, for example, from the sun. If the radiations attack us, like ultraviolet radiation, it also attacks the plants. So the plants would make those proteins that would prevent damage to their DNA, and it would prevent the attacks or repair the damage that is done by ultraviolet lights. So those are other types of lectins. There are lectins that help the plant, for example, clean the cells or uh, uh, provide food for other animals if consumed in small quantity in such a way that the plants still thrive. So yes, plants are smarter than us and learn how to use anything in its environment for their own benefit. We think that because we know how to talk and we understand each other, and because we do not understand the way plants communicate, that we are smart. Well, let me surprise many of my listeners that plants are on this planet way before we are in, and they will be in this planet after we're gonna be gone. They had enough time to develop mechanisms which we do not understand yet fully that do protect themselves, and they are not stupid. They know how to thrive in extremely harsh environments. Yeah,
No.
and
Yes. Survivors, survivors, yes. And are plants good for us, for the people?
there are plants that are unbelievable good for us. For example, fruits. Think about how plants develop fruits and why. Plants wanted to have babies and to have progeny. So we initially plants used insects for pollination, but there are other plants that decided to make bigger fruits. So the progeny would not fall right next to there, but it will have a chance to be moved, from example, from one area to the other area. So plants develop seeds. They made fruits, and inside the fruit, they put a tiny little plant ready to germinate. If the good conditions are encountered, the new plant that is encapsulated into a seed, like an acorn, will become an oak. But how on earth would that acorn be transferred from this side to 20 feet down the road because the plants didn't have arms and didn't have legs? Go the distance. So they said, well, look, for example, at the squirrel. It could serve me. So what the plant did, it encapsulated the seed, hoping that the squirrel will come, which it does, collect the seeds. It will eat some of them, which will be good for the plant, for the squirrel. But some of them will end up in different plants where a new plant will grow. It worked. So the plant says, well, if this works with an acorn, maybe it will work with an apple or a mango. And for example, I have 4 mangoes trees in my house. The mangoes are unbelievable sweet. They are so good. The plant makes a big mango, and it's so wise. It puts the color and the aroma and the sugar and the smell into a plant only at the time when the little seed inside is able to germinate. Up until the little seed is not going to be able to germinate, the plant would pretty much communicate, do not eat me because I'm not ready. Will try to hide the fruit, and the fruit would be green and you wouldn't know it's there because it blends in with the leaves. Once the little seed inside is ready to germinate, the plant will increase the sugar content in the fruit. Like mango is like a candy. It's so good. It's so sweet. It will change the color of the fruit in order to attract animals, and it will change the smell in case somebody doesn't have vision. They have the smell and to attract those animals. When somebody comes and eat the fruit, hopefully will deposit the ready to germinate a seed into a place where a new, in this case mango tree, would grow. I thought this is amazing. I thought, that plants really do not have my interest in their mind. They have their interest. But in order for the plant to achieve its goal, it uses this like bait and tackle mechanism, very, very clever uh, uh, mechanism to promote its progeny. So effective were those mechanisms that there is no part on this earth that doesn't have plants. Plants grow all over. And the reason they do, one of the reasons, is because it knew how to use plants and animals to lure us. You ask me if the plants are good for us.
Yes.
Many plants are good for us. Many, many plants are good for us because plants want to be consumed or wants the fruits to be consumed. When a plant doesn't want to be eaten away, it will make lectins that are so poisonous and so deadly for us that we will not be able to eat. Or if we do, we're just gonna die.
this means bad taste or bad smell or bad color. What?
Not they are sometimes it's bad color, sometimes it's bad smell, but sometimes they attack, for example, nerves. Many of the poisons we know are made from plants because people learn how to identify a poisonous plant and not give it to humans. In United States, for example, between 8 to 10% of the livestock annually die because they are poisoned by what they eat in the field. Plants are not innocent. Plants know when you want when they want to be consumed or partially consumed, or when they don't want extinction, like to be eaten away until they get extinct. And they will make, sometime in milliseconds, chemicals that would poison the host. So yes, they are like super, super smart. Yeah, so many plants are good for us, but many plants are not good for us. And the difference lies in probably knowing which ones are good, which ones are bad. And this is knowledge accumulated over the century. Like carrots. Carrots are good for us.
Yeah.
Let's so on.
Yes. And how plants developed into bad or good?
They develop into bad or good function of their intention. If they, for example, there are plants that if you eat the leaves, the roots will multiply. So it would serve the plant. This type of plants would be very good for the host because the plant would want you to eat the leaves. So far goes this that the plants affect the GI. For example, this is amazing. For example, when you eat a fruit, the type of sugar in the fruit is two. It's glucose and fructose. The fructose will affect the gut in such a way that it will tell your body not to have the satiety, like not to feel that it's full, to keep eating. You know, you pretty much overeat good fruits when they are in season. And this is because the fruits want you to overeat. So you disperse more seeds. Some fruits affect our nervous system. Look at what happens to marijuana, CBD. CBD works on our nervous system. Opioids work on our nervous system. Now, when we eat or when we take opioids, the body does not have a lack of opioids, but the body has receptors that are there for opioids to give you the good feeling. When you take opioids like puppy, those lectins are going to connect into what it's called receptors, in this case for opioids, and have the same reaction as some people take drugs. Marijuana. Marijuana fits into a receptor in the body. Actually, there are two main receptors. Recently, another 12 were identified that promotes homeostasis. So nobody has a lack of marijuana. But if you eat marijuana, and because it hooks into the receptors of well being, it will promote homeostasis, well being, and the patient would feel relaxed. It will feel good. If they have pain, the pain will be decreased. It will help with epilepsy episodes or uh, ulcerative colitis or other major disease that we don't know how to treat. And plants develop into good or bad not because of us, but because of them. Yeah,
Yeah. And talking about these things, do plants think?
I used to think that plants are like a piece of wood or like this furniture that no. But after I started to research plants for the book that I wrote, I realized that they're a lot smarter than I thought. For example, uh, recently the research proved that plants help their progeny survive. How did they do that? They took a pine branch and they completely isolated from the environment, and with a like a plastic bag, and they injected inside the balloon that formed um, carbon dioxide, carbon that was radioactive. And they did that to see exactly where that carbon would go. Few days later, they came and they found that the radioactive carbon that they injected in this big, beautiful branch of a tree showed up about 50 yards, 50 meters from where they put it, into a baby tree. That means that the mud mama plant made sugar and developed and send it through the roots, through the mycelium, to the baby to help him survive. Not only that they do that, but they also made chemicals to try to keep other trees away from their baby. So the baby will have a chance to survive. When I saw that, I said, my God, are plants thinking? On a field where they, for example, a lot of animals that graze, uh, everything will be nice and dandy until they overgraze. When they overgraze and they eat too much of the plants, and the plants start to be like in a survival mode, the plants will make chemicals that will affect the GI of the grazer, to the point that the grazer will either die or will end up in the hospital bleeding to death unless something comes up. Do plants think? How do they do that? How do they sense that somebody's overgrazing them? I think that they have a mechanism that they sense this. I don't know if they have higher thinking like us, but because of the stuff that they do on a regular basis, I incline to think that they are thinking organisms.
Yeah, they have a kind of AI of the plant.
They have something. We did not we do not know how to talk to plants. But listen, if you have music, when I grow orchids, so if I put music and if I am calm, the plants would grow nicer. If I put rock and roll, the plants would tilt away. Do they hear? How on earth
Really?
can this be possible? I don't know, but obviously something is happening. The fact that I do not know what happens does not rule out the fact that the plants don't have a way of sorting information and selecting what is good for them.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And the last question, how can we differentiate between bad plants for us and good plants?
We going exactly to the theme of my book, The End of Aging. Education is the number one way of preventing from eating the bad plants versus the good plants. The bad mushrooms versus mushrooms. Now, when somebody eats a bad mushroom and they go like a little crazy, we go, ah, he ate a bad mushroom. But we never start to think what happened and how come a bad mushroom affected him. But plants do affect us. Many plants, most of the plants are good for us, most of them, but not all. Education would differentiate, and along history, many people learn to use the good. Look, for example, at what happens with like wild turkeys. They are born from a seed and they have instinctively knowing which plants are good and which ones to avoid, because it passed through generation and it's probably part of their DNA to automatically know which plant is good for them and which plant to avoid like the plague. So yes, it's probably education, education. I don't know if we are born with the same type of um, knowing like the baby turkeys, but you could always find information on Google if you do not know a plant. And education would be the number one. It's better not to try it on yourself. It's better to consult other sources. Yeah, if a plant is good for you or not.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farkas. It was a great pleasure for us. A very interesting information, and I hope you join for future videos about all kind of interesting topics
Of course.
about health and, of course, about how to avoid the aging, how to live forever, maybe.
Maybe in the future. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Farkas.
Say thank you for having me.
Thank you, and for all our listeners for joining us. Thank you very much.